Welcome, everyone. Does anyone need a book? They're back there on the table, and we can have someone bring it up to you if you need one. But this semester, Praying Like the Psalmists, the study of the Psalms by Edwin Crozier. And Edwin, he's also going to be with us with our spring meeting, so it's exciting there. But one of the things, I love studying the Psalms. So much of it, it's just so gut level. Whether he's in despair and complaint or whether he's in praise and honoring God, he just kind of like lays it all out on the table. And I love that, the way he expresses his heart. No matter where he's at, he still goes to God. Now, does everyone here feel like their prayer life is where it should be? Let me put that another way. Are there areas that you would like to improve your prayer life in? And I want to be very transparent here for all of us as we talk about this and think about this. One of the areas that I want to be better at in my prayer life is to be 100% engaged, my heart to be 100% engaged when I go to God in prayer. Because sometimes we just feel like we're in a hurry. Okay, let's go ahead and pray, and things. And my heart is not fully engaged. And that's where I want to improve on my prayer life. That's one area that I want to improve on in my prayer life, is being, when I go to my God in prayer, my Creator, I want my heart to be 100% engaged. Samantha.
You kind of hit on something. I was just thinking, I want to learn how to be better about being more specific. And
Okay.
like you said, not only that, but just being, especially when it comes to praying for other people, just being more deep about it.
Being more what? What was it?
Being more deep about it.
Okay.
Being more specific and more into it, I guess.
Okay.
So similar to what you were saying.
And I'll just put down totally engaged with heart. What else? Ethan?
I feel like a lot of the time I'm just saying the same thing over and over and kind of wanting new ideas or ways to express things.
Okay. New ways to express self, new ideas. I'm going to put focus on that also. Be more focused in my.
What's the question?
What do we would improve better prayer?
Yeah, what would you like to improve in your prayer life?
Okay.
What?
I would say to have a better one, and what I mean by that is, I pray every once in a while, but actually initially and engaging in a life of prayer.
Consistency, more
consistency
consistency in our prayers.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Being vulnerable,
And explain that.
not kind of going through the routine, being more connected with our emotions, being more vulnerable about
Okay.
what we're struggling with, what we're thinking, what we're feeling.
Okay. Kind of like the psalmist, just expressing whatever's in our heart.
Exactly, even if it's thoughts that we're like, oh, I shouldn't think that. I mean, there's psalms where the psalmist is like, God, you don't even care about me. And so often we're like, oh, I could never say that. But it's okay to express those thoughts.
So totally expressing ourselves. Yeah. What else? Anything you can think of? Consistency, I think what you were talking, authenticity I had down here. Confidence in our prayers. And you know, seeking His will, but still confident in what we're praying there. Chet?
Problem I have is when I go to God in prayer for the sick, to mention the names of the people who are in our congregation who are suffering. And that's the problem I have with recall of the list of the names.
Okay.
Maybe you could say total recall.
Recall of who we need to pray. And I know what you're talking about because there was one of the men we support over in Zimbabwe. He told me the other day that his wife had had a miscarriage and to be praying for him. And you know, and then a few days later, I was trying to remember now, was this Robert or Jack or who? You know, I just could not remember which one it was that told me. Anything else? Andrew? I'm sure I spelled spontaneity wrong. Spontaneity and personal and less formality. Anything else? Samantha?
That kind of came to my mind is, and I wondered this before, like, let's say you have someone in mind, but you don't know how to specifically pray for them, you don't know what could be going on or what, you know. I guess how to pray more generally when you don't know how to be specific. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Okay.
But like, let's say I don't know how to pray for you, but I want to. That's what I'm saying. Like, how would I know what to ask? I don't know if that makes any sense. But.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how to word it. I don't know if I can word it. I don't know.
I'm just glad everybody knew what I meant.
Knowing what to ask for with. Okay. Anything else? We need at least one more to have a top 10. So let's.
I think being more thankful,
Okay.
more grateful.
More thankful. And that's kind of an area also I'd like to improve on is the different areas, you know, of whether it's thanksgiving, whether it's praise, you know, just to be better at all those different areas in my prayer life, I think. But, okay, so we've got our top 10 list there of things that we can kind of look at as we go along through our class this semester and kind of see, you know, how we can improve in these ways that we want to improve our prayer life. But in the lesson here on what page is this here? Well, Believing in God of the Psalmist, part 1 there. But he talks about, down there at the bottom of that first paragraph, yet the very first step in praying as the psalmist is not about the kinds of psalms they wrote, the images they used, or even the words they employed. The fundamental key to praying like the psalmist is believing in their God. More than the casual declaration, I believe in the God of the Bible, we must develop a deeper level of faith in the God the psalmist revealed. When we believe in their God, praying like they did will come naturally. So, a lot of times when I start out a class, and it's kind of like what Edwin's done here, he's going to talk a lot about the attributes of God. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can improve our prayer life, improve our faith, is to have a better understanding of his attributes. And that's really what, in the first couple of lessons here, Edwin Crozier talks about here. But I want to, before we really get started in the lesson, I want to look at Psalm 1, because Psalm 1 really sets the stage for the other 149 Psalms as we look at those in more depth. But we see, blessed or very happy, very joyful is the man. And then we're going to see what he does not do. And then we're going to see what he does do. So blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. And notice as we read this first verse here, the progressive nature of sin, how each one of these he talks about do not do. There's a more deliberate, more decided action in what he's about to do. Blessed is a man who does not walk, or that's his way of life, in the counsel of the wicked. So you see somebody kind of walking, and then, or stand in the way of sinners. So he's walking and then he's stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers. So we almost see the progression of sin like there's a more deliberate action in each one of those there. And then here's the contrast, but here's what he does. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. So it's his delight. It's not burdensome to him. You know, it's something that's a real joy to him. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. And that Lord is Yahweh, or Latinized Jehovah. And on his law he will meditate. He meditates day and night. So he's habitually thinking about God's law and God himself. He is like a tree planted by the streams of water. You know, these abundant roots which yields its fruit in season. He's fruitful, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever he does prospers. And then the contrast again. Not so the wicked. And we see when you're talking about the chaff there, you know, it's dead, it's unattached, it's basically worthless. They are like the chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord Yahweh watches over the way of the righteous, their manner of life, but the way of the wicked will perish. So we see in this very first psalm here, that really sets the stage for all the other psalms. Here, just the blessedness of the man that trusts in him, and then, well, actually that's kind of the theme of the Bible, isn't it? And the blessings that we receive from Christ. But, okay, as we get on down through here, that first God is, it talks about there. So who says there is no God, according to Psalm 14:1 and 53:1? The fool says in his heart there is no God. Yeah, right. The fool says this. Now, in Psalm 10, and in verse, hold on here, let me see here. In Psalm 10, and I won't go over it, but it talks about God has forgotten, he covers his face, he never sees. And then again in Psalm 97, or 94:7, it's very similar. He says, for the Lord does not see. And even though they may not say in their heart that there is no God, it's more practical atheism here. So my question is, how can we be like the practical atheist that's talked about in Psalm 10 and 94? How can we be like that practical atheist? We may not say the fool says in his heart there is no God, but we may live our lives.
Not trusting.
Okay, not trusting? What else?
Our actions show
Okay, our actions show we may believe there's a God, but we still put ourselves on that pedestal rather than Him. Okay? So that's how we can be practical atheists, is putting our will above His will. Living our lives doing what we want to do rather than what He wants us to do. And then considering some of the hardships, that question number 2 there, considering some of the hardships and anguish we read from the psalmist. For example, read Psalm 88. Why do you think they kept praying? You know, in Psalm 88, let's all turn over there. I mean, Psalm 88 is just filled with despondency and grief and turmoil. But you see verses 3 and 4 of Psalm 88. For my soul is full of trouble and my life draws near the grave. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am like a man without strength. I am set apart with the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave. Verse 8. You have taken from me my closest friends and have made me repulsive to them. I am confined and cannot escape. My eyes are dim with grief. Down to verse 14. Why, O Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? From my youth I have been afflicted and close to death. I have suffered your terrors and am in despair. Your wrath has swept over me. So we see down through here, you know, where there's just this turmoil that the psalmist is talking about. But then in verse 1, O Lord, the God who saves me, day and night I cry out before you. May my prayer come before you. Turn your ear to my cry. Verse 9, second part, I call to you, O Lord, every day. I spread out my hands to you. Verse 13, but I cry to you for help, O Lord. In the morning my prayer comes before you. So, why do you think the psalmist in this psalm kept going to God? Ethan.
So ultimately they trusted.
Yep. I had something up here that Edwin Croger, he trusts him. Let me get through a couple of these real quick. I don't know if we can read that up there. Have you ever heard where people question your faith or someone's faith when they're struggling? I mean, they're questioning and they're struggling, and then somebody questions their faith for their struggles that they're going through. But I love what Edwin Crozier says here. Even the most faithful struggle, even the most trusting doubt, even the strongest falter at times, even the most believing question. When, how long, there's one psalm that I don't remember if it's 13, but he just goes through there. Yeah, he says like 3 or 4 times, how long, how long, how long. But when, the question of when, how long, why aren't you acting? You promised to act. We fear this kind of prayer indicates a lack of faith. Apparently not, because like we just read in Psalm 88. What does then indicate a lack of faith? Not prayer. Despite the struggles, the psalmist still prays. No, lack of faith is demonstrated by ceasing to pray. Lack of faith is demonstrated by ceasing to follow, like Chet said, by not having faith. For all this psalmist struggles, he still makes them to the only one he believes can do anything about them. He still takes them to God, and when the one he is struggling with is God, the psalmist still takes his struggles to God. God's shoulders are big enough for our doubts, our struggles, our questions, even our accusations. He allows us to call him to keep his word. He allows us to question why he hasn't yet kept his word. As long as we decide to keep loving, listening to, and following his word, he accepts and even strengthens us when we are weak and doubt and struggle. If you're in the middle of the battle and you can't understand, ask him. No, I can't promise the deliverance will happen today, but I can promise as long as you are going to God as the one you know is the only one who can do anything about your struggles, He won't condemn you either. He will listen, He will comfort, and when the time is right, then He will deliver. And I think that's what we were talking about. You know, just being more vulnerable, expressing ourselves totally to Him. You know, what's on our heart. He knows what's on our heart anyway, you know. So we might as well express it to Him. And it does not mean that we're lacking faith when we're struggling. That's something we really have to get in our minds, is when we're struggling, that doesn't mean we've lost faith. Yeah.
I mean, we always look at God and we're afraid that He's going to not love us anymore, or we're afraid that we're going to upset Him or anything like that. But when you're going through a hard time with your spouse or your best friend or something, and you tell them, hey, I feel like you're not paying close enough attention to me, or hey, I'm not doing well and you're making this worse, or hey, I just don't feel like you care about me right now. Your best friend, your spouse, the somebody that knows
Truly
you,
loves you.
truly loves you, is not gonna be like, oh well, fine then, bye. Like, they're not gonna abandon you. They understand that that's okay for you. Feelings are feelings, and God's the same way. He's not going to be upset when we express those feelings.
Yep. He's got so much invested in our relationship. Greg?
Gary Henry published another gem this morning, and it regarded trust. And his observation was, trust is not the absence of vulnerability or risk of harm. Because trust is a conscious choice to put your faith in something that still has an element of it could turn out not what you want. Otherwise, it wouldn't be trust. It would be something else. It would be sight. And his observation was that if we fail to trust God when things are difficult, then our trust becomes transactional. We only trust Him when we think He's doing what we want Him to do. And trust means you still have confidence in God and His plan, even when He's not doing what you want Him to do.
And, you know, with all of Job's suffering that we're reading through this first few weeks, does God ever explain to Job why he's suffering? He never does. But He does say, trust me. Have faith in me. And we're going to talk about that more as we go on with the Psalmists. And as they look at God's holiness, as we look at God's sovereignty, as we see that God knows the big picture, and we have this small vision of ours in this particular point in time, He understands the grandness. You know, He understands every possible outcome that there is, and He works to make the outcomes come out as best.
I was just going to say with what Liz and Greg were talking about, if you think about that, the ability to trust someone to that degree and express what you're feeling and have that level of vulnerability actually shows a greater intimacy than a lack of intimacy. Because if you think about a marriage or something, if you don't
like is brought out here in Psalm 88. I mean, all these things, he brings forth this turmoil to him. And then we see these statements. He keeps going back, you're the only one that can do it, you know. But that relationship there. Good thoughts. Okay. Look over at the next psalm, since we're already in 88. Look at the next psalm. Over there. He keeps bringing up throughout this psalm, you know, about the Lord's faithfulness and his loving kindness. I think it's expressed like at least 7 times for each one of those down through there. But when you look over at verses 9 through 13 or 14 there, there's ways he expresses about God's holiness and his sovereignty and his omnipotence. So again, I think going back and chewing on and meditating like the psalmist talked about in Psalm 1, not just on his law, but God's attributes. I think that's really one of the things that's going to help us in our prayer life is having a good understanding of who our God is and what his characteristics are like. And you'll see that throughout the Psalms talking about his loving kindness, his mercy, his faithfulness. And when we remember things like that in our prayer life, it's much easier, his love for us, it's much easier to do, to be vulnerable with him, to have confidence in our prayers, to be more thankful for who he is. Like C.S. Lewis said one time, even if our God didn't have the qualities that he had, his love and his faithfulness, we would still be obligated to worship him because he's God. But thank God that our God is who he is and has the attributes and the qualities he has. Chet?
I want to relate something to you. I mean, this is a little different than our class. I could have gotten discouraged when I lost 2 wives.
Yeah.
One, she had cancer. She passed away. I met a lady from Alabama. We decided to get married. She wouldn't move to Indiana, so I moved to Alabama. Well, she had Parkinson's, and she passed away. I could have easily gotten discouraged and turned against God, but I didn't. It drew me closer to God because I realized those 2 are in a better place than what we are. They're not suffering. What we've got to face, we don't know, but with God's help, we'll be able to get through it.
Yep, exactly. We don't always understand the why, do we?
That's right.
Oftentimes, we don't understand the why, but when we have those questions like that, he simply says, trust me. And we just need to trust him. And if it's a difficult time, take that to him in prayer. If it's a difficult time, remember his attributes, of his faithfulness and how much he loved us and what he did for us. So. Okay.
Hey, Jeff. I went looking for it and I couldn't find it. Was Psalms 139 one of our assigned Psalms in the first lesson? Or did
Yeah, I think so.
I thought it was. Are you going to talk about Psalms 139?
Yeah. Question 6.
I'll wait.
We'll get there.
I couldn't find it.
I don't know how quickly we'll get there. And what we're going to try to do, we may have to speed it up some, like on Sunday, but I do want to keep on schedule since people have been assigned certain lessons throughout this semester. I don't want to cut into their time by, taking their time. Okay, read Psalm 8 there. That's a very familiar psalm to us. It's quoted, I believe, a couple of times in the New Testament. Yeah, Matthew and Hebrews, Psalm 8. Who'll go ahead and read that for us? And notice as we read it that there's the bookends of verse 1 and verse 9. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. So everything in between the bookend is to be seen through the lens of those 2 verses there. But someone go ahead and read Psalm 8 for us.
O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babies and infants you have established strength because of your foes, to still the enemy and the avenger. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with the glory and honor. You have given him dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, also the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth.
Okay. So when we look up at the stars, what are we actually seeing?
God's art.
What's that?
God's art.
God's art. We're seeing his holiness, for one thing. I think I put a slide here because there is none other that could have created. When we look at his holiness from the word Kadesh, separate and distinct, uncommon, unique, exclusive, unparalleled or unequal, otherliness, his deity transcendent. That's too bad Bray isn't up here because he would like this. You may not be able to switch to the side here. No, you can't. But we see the earth, God's handiwork, God's glory in his creation. But I love to look online about the universe and things and just how huge it is and how many billions of galaxies there are and things. But when you look at this and you look at that little dot down there at the bottom of the earth and you look at the sun, and then you look at Betelgeuse, the star, and Antares, and you see our sun is down there, that little bitty speck down there in the bottom left. And you see how big those are. And you see Antares, how big Antares is. And then you see Antares, how big it was compared to this one. And there are much bigger stars than this here. And then when you think about God's handiwork, you think of our galaxy and how our sun is on one of these little bitty spiral arms that are out here, which is, I don't know how many light years it is across, but it's a lot of light years. And then you think of the billions of galaxies that are in the universe and how that just declares God's glory. You know, when you look up at the stars and you just see, it's amazing what the new telescope can see. It takes just this little bitty tiny spot. Is it Webb? What is it?
Yeah.
The Webb. It takes a little bitty tiny spot, and then it photographs that, and there's all these galaxies in that little bitty spot in space. You know, and that declares, like the psalmist says here, God's glory. When we look up there, it declares his holiness, it declares his sovereignty, it declares his power. So, anybody else have anything on that?
It's almost unbelievable, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
You know, and you go from that to looking out there, and then when you think about what Buddy Payne was talking about, and what we'll look at when we get to Psalm 139 about the intricacies of the human body. Just at the opposite ends of this, the spectrum, both of those are declaring his holiness.
And you believe it because simply you have that much faith in him. You know, as unbelievable as it is, it's like, okay, I know this is true. I know this is all for a purpose and reason because of his beauty and the reason he's done things.
And this psalm here, verses 4 through 6 there, the messianic part of that also. But then truly, when you think about the holiness of God and when you think about this here, and what is it that you are mindful of man? What is it that you're mindful of me? Why do you want a relationship with me? Anyone else have anything on that? Verses 3 through 8 talk about his exalted position, his holiness, his kingship, and he still wants a relationship with us. Okay, question number 4 on the next page there. What does this tell us about the God to whom the psalmist prayed? I think we pretty much discussed that, really. Any thoughts on that one? What does this tell us about the God to whom the psalmist prayed?
Tells us God is all-knowing and all-powerful
All-knowing, all-powerful,
and all-loving.
all-loving. There's none other like him.
Right.
His holiness, his love and concern for mankind. And his desire for a relationship with us. Okay. According to Psalm 19, 1 through 6, let's go there. Psalm 19, 1 through 6. I'm going to read that. Go ahead and read down through 8. Let's go ahead and read down through 8. Psalm 19, 1 through 8, please.
I got it. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. You said through 8.
Yeah, please.
The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes.
Thank you. And what I had down here is there's 2 witnesses of God that the psalmist talks about here. One is the glory that's manifested in the book of nature, the skies, the heavens, all that. And the other one is in the book of God's law. And both of these declare the glory of God. Okay? And what the psalmist is talking about there, look how he says the heavens declare, the skies proclaim, day after day they pour forth speech. So declare, proclaim, pour forth. It's like, I think as Liz said, it's almost as if glory was written across the skies. His glory. You know, it's almost as if it was written across the sky there. So, okay, now, Psalm 139. Verses 13 through 16. For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth, and I saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So, if our God is a creator, what is he according to Psalm 139, 13 through 16? Mr. Gray, did you want to speak on this psalm?
It's a question or not, but when we were talking about the heavens, the stars, and the moon, it said that God had ordained them, and he uses the same language, at least in this translation here, is that our days are ordained and written in this book. And that word ordination is that which has been purposed prayed this evening about God knowing my plan, even though I don't understand it. I don't know why the stars and the moon exist when there's so many billions of miles. They don't really impact my life, but they're there. And they were ordained, they were fixed, they were planned, they have purpose. And the same mind, the same power, and the same creative force that could ordain the moon and the stars is the one that has ordained my days before my days began. And I find that, as beautiful as the night sky is, I don't see as well as I used to. But in my mind's eye, I see this as God put as much into creation in each one of us as He did with the universe. As much planning, forethought, and ordination. And that's pretty amazing.
I love the Psalms, and I love talking about His attributes and thinking about those things. And when we combine that with our prayer life, I think it can help us to improve our prayer life. So for Sunday, let's go ahead and do the second half of this lesson and the first half of lesson 2, if you would. So if we can, go ahead and get down through page 8 of the second lesson, if you would. So thanks for your comments tonight. Appreciate it.